but I did go to Saül, which is in the middle of French Guiana. It's only accessible by air, no road and no boat, only by a small aircraft, like in Jurassic Park 3, if anyone's seen that. And no words. That's another one of my favorite places. Like just the pure Amazon jungle, pure, like untouched. I could hear the howler monkeys in the morning from my hammock. You have to sleep in hammocks because you can't sleep on the floor. There's too many things that can kill you. And so that was incredible. And again, the birding was always there.
Hello and welcome back to the Birding Today podcast. I'm Jeremy Ringmeyer, and this week we are doing something a little bit different. We're flipping the table and interviewing the creator of the Birding Today podcast, Guillaume Durig, in our first Ask the Hopes episode. So Guillaume, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. This is interesting. I'm ready to be interviewed. I'm relaxing. I've got my beer, just cracked it open. So
I thought about a beer. I brewed a cup of tea.
Okay.
But I might sneak out halfway. This might not last the whole episode, so I'll sneak out and grab a beer once this is empty.
That'd be great. Hey, so thank you so much for this. I think it was your idea to do this, and I think Simon Gorta also said something like that when I interviewed him. So this is great. Maybe we can make this into a kind of Ask the Host special episode. So thanks, man.
Yeah, I reckon that we'll go from here. I'll ask. I think I've made a nice little bunch of obvious questions that I think everybody's probably curious to know. But yeah, I reckon maybe in the comments, send Guillaume an email, in the YouTube comments, fire off some sort of like FAQ type questions for the host, and maybe we can do another one, something similar to this in seasons and episodes to come.
That sounds great, man. Yep, I think that's a good idea. And if you have anything you want to add or any sort of feedback, you can also write to birdingtoday@gmail.com. That'll come straight back to me, and we can figure something out. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get stuck into it. So, Guillaume, what brings you joy from birding?
Oh man, it's so weird to be on the other side. I've asked that question so many times, and I haven't really formulated my own answer. And
I don't think anybody's truly answered that. It's probably nearly 30 episodes in, and I don't think anybody's really answered that question exactly the same.
That's a good point. Yeah, like and that's a reflection on the joy of birding. Every person has their own twist or their own perception of the joy of birding and what brings them joy from birding. For me, I think I alluded to this in a couple of previous episodes, which is you get to glimpse a moment in a bird's life, and that's shrouded in mystery, and you don't know what it's doing for the rest of the time that it's alive, and you're only glimpsing that moment in its life. And for me, that's a special aspect of birding, and it brings me joy, and just sharing the moment with the bird, you know what I mean, like something like connecting with nature.
I think I've been thinking about often. So like you get questions like what makes a good birder or what makes a birder, and I think there's different types of bird watchers as well. And you get people we'll talk about list keeping and all that kind of stuff later, but I think you get kind of sort of like the more huntery type of bird watchers, and they're sometimes the people who get really like list obsessed or photo obsessed. And then you've got this other type of bird watcher who they're sort of interested in learning about the bird. And sometimes you'll get people who I can think of like some crazy uber twitchers who are completely obsessed with like learning about bird behavior as well. So they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but that's sort of that idea of like getting to know the birds a little bit better, and sort of like getting that little insight of the sort of like a few minutes of the life of a bird or an animal or anything. It's like what makes them tick.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think to add to that as well, I'd say the joy of birding for me also comes in like specific moments, like that very first moment that you recognize and ID a bird, especially if it's a cool bird or a rare bird. That's joyful, and you just get exhilarated. It's like, I was at the Katana wetlands up here in Cairns a couple of days ago, and I saw a varied triller, right? A
Yep.
male.
Mhm.
They are stunning, man. They're so
Yep.
amazing. And
Yep.
that joy that I got, like, it's just, and that's another such an interesting thing where you don't even realize that you're IDing the bird, but you already know it's a varied triller because of
Yep.
just the appearance. That's psychologically interesting. You know what I mean? Like, it's just instant.
Yep. And that's the I think often you'll have where, like, if you're really into birds, you might be a relatively new bird watcher, and you might have only seen a couple hundred species in Australia. But you can go to a new birding spot and you've done your research and you know what to expect.
Mm.
And there's a different, and this is like compared to when you're birding in a different country and it's so foreign, and it's like you've skimmed through the field guide a little bit. Well, I have, but I haven't meticulously studied, and you get this completely different thing going on where you go, oh, that's a such and such, and I know this because this is something that I've been sort of like studying on, and I've learned about these birds, and I finally got to see one because I've been hanging out with this, versus rocking up at a location for the first time, hopping off the aeroplane, going for a walk down the street, and there's a bird sitting on the power line. You're like, I have no idea what that is, and it's a completely different response.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. That's, and the joy of birding is like international. That's the other thing that you touched on. Like, so many things to say. Yeah.
So, for regular listeners of the show, will know that you've grown up outside of Australia, and you've moved around quite a bit in your childhood and early, sort of like early adulthood. Tell us about growing up in Switzerland. You grew up in Switzerland?
Okay, it's a long story. How long have you got?
I don't know. How long have you got? It's your podcast. You can go nuts. I think tell us about all of your travels and moving around growing up, and how you think that moving to different spots affected sort of the way that you've become a bird watcher today.
Yeah, really good question. So I was born in Marseille in France in 1996. And so to keep it brief, after 6 months there, my parents moved to Paris, where we stayed until about 2001 or maybe 2000, at which point we moved to Glasgow in Scotland.
Right.
And it was in Scotland that I first really got the bird bug.
Yeah.
So one thing to note about this is that in the UK and in Northern Europe in general, bird feeders are a huge thing.
Yeah.
So with seeds, you've got these little pellets of balls of fat that you hang out for the blue tits, and all those northern birds. So I got into doing that and like trying to connect with the birds by feeding them and providing seeds, in the winter months where it's really cold in the UK, especially in Scotland, and I just got, and it just pretty much rolled over from there to a general passion for birding. And I can tell you a story where I was, so in the UK that you get siskins, European siskins, mm-hmm. and they eat a particular type of seed. I forget the name of the seed, but it's thinner. They like these little seeds, and I put them strategically in the local park, right? Just in a kind of backwards place of the park, down the path, and the feeders were there, and I saw them feeding, and I got so much joy from that. Like, oh wow, they're actually feeding from my feeders. It's incredible. Yeah. And then this gray squirrel kind of came and chased them away and tried to get at the seeds. So I looked online, and I think my memory is a bit vague, but I remember on the RSPB website it said, oh, if squirrels are attacking your feeder, or if they're getting the seeds or stealing the food, you can put chili powder.
Yeah.
And the birds don't care about that, but the squirrel does. But I didn't have any chili powder, so I think I put something like cinnamon on it, and it didn't work.
It did not work.
So
I had when I was living in Melbourne, we had brush-tailed possums that were getting into my veggie garden, and I also got the put chili on it advice.
Oh.
But I was growing a couple of heritage variety of tomato. I had a tiny little terrace courtyard space. I didn't have very much light at all.
Uh-huh.
So the tiny bit of light that I had chilies growing and tomatoes. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try this chili thing. And before I even got a chance to do the chili thing, they started eating my chilies. And I was growing, so they ate the entire chilies. And I had a Trinidad scorpion, and I don't know if you're a chili head, but that's like the second hottest chili in the world. And they had a nibble of it one night, and then the following evening they stripped the entire plant of every single chili pod growing on it.
No way. Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole mammals don't eat chilies nonsense. If they're hungry enough, they'll take over it. I think that's a real cultural difference between the way. I mean, you often talk about why is birding not as big in Australia as it is in the UK and the US, and it's the feeder interaction thing is a big component of it. And I think that's when we start thinking about bird watching circles in Australia, we have sort of people who feed birds over here, and then we have people who do bird watching, and that sort of like Venn diagram of that demographic, they don't necessarily cross over as well as they do in other countries. And I think like, because my parents feed, they live in Brisbane, they've got king parrots, they have pale-headed rosellas come in, and they put seed out for them. They have pied currawongs and magpies and kookaburras and grey butcherbird, and they feed them kangaroo. So like they're meticulous feeders of birds, but they are not. They go bird watching. They go out and they'll go out on a drive, and then they'll go and see some of the common things, and they'll report back to me the birds that they've spotted. But I would not call them bird. I would not call them birders, and definitely would not call them twitchers. So yeah, that's like an interesting example of how I think like organizations like RSPB actively encourage the feeding of birds, and Audubon, and as well in the US, and they have all this stuff associated with feeding birds, and it's just not it's not as done in Australia.
Yeah, I think I would also like, my perception is that it's almost frowned upon here, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's if you read Tim Lowe's book Where Song Began?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so he has a whole section at the beginning about the whole nectar, the battle for nectar, and how that's driven this really competitive urban environment with our birds here. And they talk about the potential sort of deleterious effects of having, because Australian birds are basically they're assholes. They chase each other, and the noisy miners will kill other small passerines.
They kill them.
Yeah. So so Australian birds are just like off the charts on the aggression level, and feeding birds in your backyard can potentially throw some local balances out. So I think that's the main reason why it gets discouraged in bird watching circles here. But there's something to be, so I think so I work for BirdLife, and our sort of urban birds department have a bunch of recommendations of things that you can do to bring more birds into your garden.
It's got to do with the plants, doesn't it, and the gardening configuration.
Yeah, that's right. It's about increasing the structural complexity of the understory in your yard, and that will encourage greater species diversity. It'll give cover for those birds as well. But also, we often go, attract birds to your yard, put a bunch of grevilleas in, and that just encourages the aggressive nectarvores as well. So it's a bit more. It's a wicked issue, and it's quite complex.
To bring it back to also those siskins, right? And when I was in Scotland, we were in Scotland for like 8 years. So I guess I should give some background. My dad is a microbiologist.
Okay.
And so that's why we kind of traveled a lot, because he kind of had to move with his job. So we were in Scotland for 8 years, and during those 8 years, I got into birding more and more. Like, I don't remember really when I first became a birder. It kind of always was part of me because my dad is a birder.
Right.
So that's also a common theme that I like to touch on in the show, on the regular episodes, like the familial ties with birding, and that for me was my dad. And he's still, of course, still a birder, and he's still a great birder, and he's actually leading tours now.
Yeah. And do they live in Australia as well, or how did you? Or we're probably jumping the gun now, but we'll. Do they live in Australia too, or where do they live now?
Yeah, no, my parents are both here. So basically, we left Scotland in 2009 to then move to Switzerland, which is where my dad is from. He's from the French-speaking part of Switzerland, which is next to France. And we lived there for a couple of years, and I went to school there. And great birding there in the Swiss Alps. Oh, you get the nutcracker and the wall creeper, and what else? The bearded vulture. All these cool alpine birds. So that was, and the great thing about my Swiss experience in birding was that there was a really great young birders group that was really active and serious about being active, and just going out on, it was like a couple, if I remember correctly, it was like a couple of like 20, 22, 25-year-olds who kind of made the core of the group, and then us younger ones, I was like, 14, 15, 16 at the time, would kind of tag along and we looked up to them. They had these Swarovski telescopes and these crazy binoculars, and we were like, wow.
And they had cars as well, probably.
Yeah.
That's super important for bird watching.
Although in Switzerland, the rail network is extremely well developed, and so I used to go when we lived in Switzerland. I used to go on by myself on the train. With my telescope and binoculars, and you can get anywhere in Switzerland on the train. So I once went to twitch a red phalarope, which had got to the Thun Lake in Swiss Germany, and that was like a 3-hour ride on the train. I just went. I must have been 15, maybe 15, and I just went. And that was great about Switzerland, So I've always had that drive. I've always been a birder, really.
3 hours by train. I'd be amazed if you can go for 3 hours in a train in most places in Australia.
Which is surprising given the land area. Like, it's got so much potential for rail, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, that's a whole. The line stops here in Perth at. I think it stops at just after Margaret. Just after Mandurah, and it doesn't actually go the whole way down to Margaret River, and it's like just make it a little, just for 45 minutes, and then we can live in Margaret River and just catch the train to work each day. But no, there's so much space, and so the population's all sort of like hyper concentrated and then spread out, and it just doesn't really.
That's right. Yeah. And Switzerland is such a tiny country as well that it justifies having a really well developed rail system. But so I was in Switzerland, like I said, and I had a great time with the young birders there. And it was specific to kind of my place, my city, Morges or Lausanne. And Lake Geneva, so many cool birds there. Like you have these tens of thousands of tufted ducks that come in the winter, and potsherds as well.
Okay.
So great birding. Europe's great for birding.
That's I've spent a little bit of time in France and a little bit of time in Scotland, and I thought the birding was awesome. It's not that, like, sure, you're not going to go for a walk and see 100 species, but you're going to see birds, and they show really well, and they've got really good personalities. And there's like a nice variety of different types of birds as well. It's not like you've just got all 20 species of parrot sitting in a tree and there's nothing else. So it's I really quite enjoyed the time that I spent birding in Europe as well. So that's must be something about the birds in the UK and Europe which gets everyone hooked.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, we then in 2020, when was it? This is running my memory now. It must have been in 2011. My dad got an offer to work for Monash University in Melbourne.
Right. And this is after you lived in Chile.
Before.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Oh, man. But yeah, so that was in 2011. And so we all moved as a family to Melbourne, Australia in 2011. And so we made the most of that to make a pit stop in Singapore and Borneo.
Okay. Yeah.
So you can imagine what I did when I was
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
with my dad. So that was cool as well. And again, broadening. I've been so blessed, I was able to broaden my birding even further. Like it was almost overwhelming in a way because like there were these new families and new habitats and new behaviors and new orders. New orders? Would there be new orders? At least new families.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was a pit stop. We got to Melbourne, started going to school. Like I started in year 9 here in Australia.
Yeah.
And we lived in Upper Beaconsfield, which is southeast Melbourne, near Berwick, Pakenham, that area. And the bush there was incredible. Once again, expanding my birding horizons. I always remember a couple of things. I remember seeing a crested shrike tit just next to the house. One of the bronze cuckoos. I didn't know which one it was back then, but it was one of them. I don't remember. I can't tell now, and with my photographic memory. And we had a powerful owl in the garden.
Oh wow, yeah. We've my parents' backyard. We've heard them, and a lot of people in the immediate area are like, "Oh, we've had powerful owls. We saw one finally in the yard, and we hear them all the time, but they're always because the call carries forever as well.
Yeah,
so it could be you could hear it hooting away, and it could be 2 or 3 kilometers away, especially in those sort of like really still 1-2 a.m. when you get up to go to the bathroom and owl calling. Yeah, that's crazy.
Incidental checklist.
yeah, and that's definitely the sort of like yard list for that is everything seen, or because this is on a big edge of a big patch of bush, so you get a bunch of stuff flying through all the time as well, and it never actually touches down on the ground, but it's like, no, it's on the yard. I saw it from the yard. That counts for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like that's the mentality I had as well when we first moved into Upper Beak. Like we got a lyrebird as well, and it was so exotic. It was like, what, a lyrebird in the garden? What are you talking about? It's like crazy from a European perspective.
I'm more impressed with the crested shrike tit as a guy. I reckon there'll be more people with a lyrebird on their yard list than a crested shrike tit.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the crested shrike. It wasn't in the yard. It was in a reserve that was next. What was the reserve called? I don't remember what it was called. It was in the reserve next to the house. So basically, I started school. Aussie school, kind of getting into the Aussie culture, made some friends, and birding kind of kept ticking along. Went to Hatta a few times. That blew my mind. Hatta is probably still one of my favorite places in the world, along with Sturt National Park. Yeah. I love the inland.
Hatta's just amazing for it's just for parrots, just the arid parrot diversity, and just you almost, I mean, there's the little trails that everyone goes through looking for Mallee emu wren, but you can just set up near one of the lakes at camp and just hang back and just have all these different parrots fly through. It's just amazing passive birding.
Absolutely, yeah, and that was what was really interesting for me. And so time went on. I enrolled into zoology in Deakin University.
Okay.
In Geelong in Warren Ponds. But I dropped out because of a couple of factors. I wasn't, and I'm still not a citizen. I'm just a permanent resident.
Okay, right.
So I didn't have access to the HECS loans.
Yeah, okay.
So I didn't think it was a viable. It wasn't worth the thousands of dollars to pay.
And it's 2 or 3. It's for people who are not familiar with the Australian university system. It's probably 2 or 3 times more expensive as a foreign enrolled student.
Yeah, no, that's right. So I weighed up my options, and I wasn't particularly enjoying it for whatever reason. So I just thought, and other things were going on in my life at that stage that kind of eventually, together with the uni thing and lots of other things, pushed me to kind of leave Australia and see new stuff. So being a French citizen, I have a French passport, of course. So I decided to go to French Guiana, which is a French overseas department in South America, just north of the state of Amapá in Brazil. Yeah. So it's pure Amazon jungle. And I went there hoping to work in conservation. I was 19 when I left Australia on my own, and I wanted to work in conservation. I got in touch with the GIPOG, which is the sort of the equivalent of BirdLife in French Guiana. Mm-hmm. I went to their office when I got there in Cayenne, and nothing really ever panned out. Like, they didn't have positions, so I ended up working in a bar in the capital in Cayenne, and not doing as much birding as I would have liked. But I did go to Saül, which is in the middle of French Guiana. It's only accessible by air, no road and no boat, only by a small aircraft, like in Jurassic Park 3, if anyone's seen that. And no words. That's another one of my favorite places. Like, just the pure Amazon jungle, pure, like untouched. I could hear the howler monkeys in the morning from my hammock. You have to sleep in hammocks because you can't sleep on the floor. There's too many things that can kill you. And so that was incredible. And again, the birding was always there, you know. But it wasn't only the birding. That's the thing. It was the environment that I was in. The birds sort of highlighted by being there, you know, like, and there's this bird called the screaming piha, which does a call like this. It goes like that.
And that's the bird that pretty much every single jungle scene movie that you've ever watched they and it's always in David Attenborough documentaries as well, isn't it?
Yes. That's exactly right. That was my next point, to say that I was actually hearing, like, as you say, that call is often heard in the David Attenborough documentaries. And I couldn't, when I first heard it, it's like, I'm in a David Attenborough documentary. I'm in the Amazon rainforest, right? So that was incredible. And so there's a lot to cover, so I'll just soldier on. And so after that, I went to Chile. Via Brazil, because I had to go on these strange flights from Cayenne to Belém, and then Belém to Sao Paulo, and then Sao Paulo to Santiago. Just kind of layovers, no birding. And so I got to Santiago because I was really interested in the southern temperate rainforest of Chile. For some reason, it was in a David Attenborough documentary.
Who would have thunk it?
And so I just wanted to do that, and so I booked some tours with Birds Chile, which is a tour operator, and Rafael Di Biase is the coordinator for that, and the kind of manager, and he was great. He took us out, saw snowy crowned tern, which is a really sought after southern South American species, Magellanic woodpecker, big black woodpecker, which there are no woodpeckers in Australia, and that's the one thing that I really don't like about Australia. No woodpeckers.
No woodpeckers. Woodpeckers are especially in South America, when you've got that wide variety of them, and they're kind of, you'll get these mixed foraging flocks, and with maybe 2 or 3 different species of woodpeckers, and then there's piculets as well, which are better because they're smaller for some reason.
That's right. This crazy diversity. So basically, and then I went up to Santiago, and I through various mechanisms, I was staying in an Airbnb. I met my now wife, who's Chilean. And so I kind of said, okay, hey, how's it going? And then we kind of parted, just as you do, went on your travels. And I came back to Australia. And I came back to Geelong, actually, Warren Ponds, which is, a lot of my friends were based there. I don't know about now. But, and so we kept in touch on Skype. And, you know, push came to shove. And was it less than a year? Yeah, I got back from Chile. Oh, this is so difficult to remember. In December 2016, and I moved to Chile permanently in September 2017 after having visited for 1 month. So basically, I was always going back, and I lived with my mother-in-law in her house, and with my wife, and I learned Spanish. I didn't speak Spanish before then, but I learned Spanish by living with them.
How easy was that? Because you're obviously a native French speaker. So how easy was it to go from one romantic language to another one? Or was it harsh, or was it relatively easy because of that French background?
Well, Spanish and French are actually very similar linguistically. They're both Latin-based languages, so it wasn't too difficult, but I had my moments. And Chilean Spanish is notorious for being the most difficult to learn because of the accent. And they don't pronounce certain letters where they should be pronouncing them if they were speaking correct Spanish. And they've got all this slang. Anyway, so I fell in love with Chile. Chile is beautiful, like so beautiful. And I worked there. I worked as a travel agent, booking tours for Patagonia for EcoCamp. I worked for a company called Cascada Expediciones. And then COVID came, and then we had to be let go because we had zero revenue.
Zero. Yeah.
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 And so during this time in Chile, my wife and I had said, we could go to Australia, the quality of life, and it's safer for women there as well. Here in Australia, it's safer for women. And there's various, reasons to also move, what have you. There's, the security and the wages are a bit higher, the quality of life. So we just thought we could do it. And so we did. We came for a couple of months in May 2019 for a visit. And then permanently in March 2021, so just a bit more than a year ago. And so that brought us to Melbourne, where my dad lives in Glen Iris.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Dad, if you're watching. And then up to Corryong, where my mum lives, which is in the high country. Not the high country. It's sort of the Upper Murray near Albury.
Yeah, okay.
So hi, Mum, if you're listening to this, I'll probably share it with them because this is a special episode. And then it's so much. I don't know who's interested in this, but basically my wife was on a working holiday visa, and to be able to extend her visa to stay longer, she needed to go and kind of work in specific areas. So
do the regional component of it.
Yeah, the regional. So we chose fruit picking near Woolgoolga, Coffs Harbour. Yeah.
Perfect.
And so that's where we went. We did that. I think we did fruit picking for 2 weeks, and then it was too hard. That's hard, man.
No, it's borderline. Yeah. It's pretty crazy, and it's sort of like per, like a base rate plus per $1 per crate you do, sort of pyramid marketing scheme system.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. I mean, it was all right. It was a good experience. I did it with her. I didn't need to do it because as a permanent resident, I've got full working rights. But I did it with her for a bit just to see, and it was full of foreigners, people from I didn't even know, like the Pacific Islands. And so we did that for a bit, and then I shifted to work into a pizza shop because I've also got experience in hospitality and food work. And so that was at Woolgoolga at the Riptide Pizzeria. Hi, Sean, if you're listening. That was great guy, best boss. And so after that, we just decided, why did we decide to go to Cairns? I'm trying to think. Just because because Woolgoolga was quite small. It's quite a small town. So, we're a young married couple. We want to kind of have a cool city to be in and go out and eat, have dates in and, be more connected. And so we moved to Cairns. It would have been, last month. Yeah. We're still in May as we record this. So in April, we moved to Cairns. And so I started a new role. And so I'm in the travel industry. That's my profession. And so I'm lucky to have been hired as a guest reservations agent for a chain of luxury lodges up here in Queensland. So Orpheus Island, Mount Mulligan Lodge, and Daintree Eco Lodge. So I help with the reservations for that. And that brings us to this current moment. That's it.
Where we are now.
Yes.
And that sort of answers one of my questions. Well, it actually doesn't answer. It segues perfectly on. So let's talk about bird watching in the places that you've lived. So Melbourne versus Woolgoolga versus Cairns. So sort of like compare and contrast them because it's very different to visit a place specifically for the purpose of bird watching versus birding as your hobby in a place where you're living.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point. Yeah. A lot of this is going to be tinged with sentimentality. I'm very sentimental and romantic, and nostalgic. So I love Melbourne. Melbourne is so great. I just love the cold winter nights and the sort of wet. I don't know. I love something about it.
Reason why I fled Melbourne as quickly as possible. Oh my God. There's just that you've got these it's this frigid cold wind tunnel with rain, and there's no sun penetrating down, and it's just like, at least the beer's good. Yeah.
I mean, and that's why I said that it's kind of tinged with nostalgia, because like I remember and more of our lives than we think is tinged with nostalgia. That's my suspicion, not suspicion. And Melbourne is great because I don't know. I just feel like it's Victoria. Let me put it this way: Victoria, the state, is fantastic for birds, and Melbourne is situated right in the middle of all of it, pretty much. So you can get to Hatta in, what is it, 4 hours? And
Yep. We drove up there for an Easter long weekend. And 4 and a bit hours, and you're right in the thick of the Mallee.
So so you can get into the thick of these things and of these places relatively quickly. And you've got the Great Ocean Road down there, Rufous bristlebirds down that corner, and then you can go to East Gippsland to see all the stuff that you can see farther up along the East Coast. And I don't know, Melbourne and Melbourne specifically speaking as a city, it's okay. Like, and of course we were forced, all of us Melbourne birders, to just bird in Melbourne in the city for how long? Months on end.
You couldn't even go to Werribee. Couldn't even go to the poo ponds.
No, that's right. Imagine that. So we had to kind of get used to the birds that were closer to home. But I think that was a good thing. And of course, I used to go birding with my dad in Melbourne, in the parks, Huntingdale Wetlands, Wattle Park, Shepherd's Bush. Shepherd's Bush is a great spot.
So I lived in St Kilda when I was in Melbourne, so I didn't really. So I was exactly 1 mile from the fairy penguins.
Oh, so, you would have been. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would at least once a month, and I'd roll down and see what they were doing, and that was great as a sort of like the difference between visiting and birding and living and birding. That sort of those little glimpses that you get of an individual species. If you live in a spot, you can stack them up, and you can actually really start to understand what makes a species tick once you actually live in a spot, right?
For sure. And you can see them every day, and you can see what they're doing every day. And then but for me, the charm of the city of Melbourne is interlinked with the birds of Melbourne, because it has to be, doesn't it? Like, I don't know, it's just special to me.
Is there a better bird watching? I found there was like quite a large bird watching community in Melbourne as well, relative to, I think there are bird watchers in Perth, and it's either career, just where I am with my life at the moment. It's found it a little bit harder to like crack into that scene, mostly because I'm working as a bird person as an ornithologist at the moment, which I haven't done in the rest of my life. I've always done other conservation work. I sort of go, I don't want to do that because I'm just going to do that for work anyway. So I've sort of like taken a little step back in a way. But the birding scene in Melbourne there's plenty of people there's that real close knit community, and there's plenty of people who will go bird watching with you. On a whim.
No, absolutely. And a couple of things to say about that. One is, I wouldn't be surprised if Melbourne had the highest number of birders in any city of Australia.
That would seem consistent with me.
Just there's because people, go ahead.
Brisbane has tons of Brisbane has tons of bird watchers as well, but it's just, Melbourne has 4 million people all sort of jammed in close proximity with each other, and it's sort of, and they're often the sort of people who are getting into. I think if you go somewhere like Brisbane, people are into fishing, and they're into other outdoor activities where there's a different demographic of people engaging in the outdoors in a different way in each and every different place you go to. And Melbourne, it's a lot of multi-day hiking. It's a lot of and there's lots of people go bird watching. So
for sure. And this podcast started with Melbourne. It was a Melbourne-based podcast at the beginning. I had everyone from Melbourne, from Victoria, and the fact is that the very first episode was Stuart Monkton. I met Stuart. He commented on one of my videos about the Wattle Park video, and we just met in Wattle Park for some birding, and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. Do you want to be the first one?" And he said, "Yeah." And now here we are, 30 episodes later. So, and that goes to show the community of birders in Melbourne. But to kind of move it on now also to Woolgoolga and the mid north coast, of course,
Yeah.
way less birders, way less. Like, but the birding in Woolgoolga is fabulous. It's fabulous. There's a Woolgoolga Creek picnic area, so north of Coffs Harbour. That whole northern northeast New South Wales. So I believe it's so underrated for birds because people just focus on kind of Lamington and going across the border, and that they think that's where everything is. But there's such a variety of stuff just down in New South Wales as well, just in that corner.
Definitely. I think I had a friend recently from Perth, and she's went over to Brisbane for a couple of days, and she had a few days of birding, and she was sort of went to Binnaburra, went to Lamington, and it poured rain the whole time, so I don't think she saw anything really. But it's one of those things where it's like that. This is where the airport hub is. You land in Brisbane, and then you hire a car or you get a guide, and you do the closest spot that will give you all of these will give you the ticks that you want. And that's 2-ish hours away at Lamington. But the reality is if you were to have driven 3 hours and got into Main Range area, or driven 5 or 6 hours and got into Gloucester Tops and Barrington Tops, then the birding there in many ways is, especially when you're starting to deal with stuff like river scrubbird, it's much better. It's much better odds for those things. So it's just sort of this. I often ask people, what's the best place to go for this species, and they'll tell you the best place, which is close. And what you really wanted was, no, I'm happy to drive another 3 hours. Tell me where the best spot is. So yeah, you don't actually get the piece of information that you really wanted.
Yeah, no, for sure. And for me personally speaking, and also I think geographically speaking, Coffs Harbour and Woolgoolga, that's in some sense the start of the tropics in a way, because that's just when you get a little bit more humid and that little bit of extra sunlight and those special birds that come down on a regular basis. And you could argue that this is the case from Sydney upwards, but I think from Coffs Harbour upwards,
it's from Sydney upwards. You're getting influenced sort of by a summer monsoonal weather system, whereas once you swing a little bit further around, then you've got this winter-dominated rainfall pattern. And that's sort of like, and definitely Coffs Harbour is climatically and vegetation-wise, it's probably more similar to Brisbane than it would be to Sydney.
Oh, do you reckon? Really?
Yeah, definitely. You got this extension of this sort of, although basically you've got the Brisbane Valley, and then you go down to the Tweed Valley, and you've got this run of river valleys all the way down to the Richmond River, which are kind of sort of like little clone copies of themselves as you run down. And they've got that same influence with the Great Dividing Range. And the Great Dividing Range is sort of like the plate's buckled and it's pushed up, and then you've got this granite base layer, and then you've got this volcanic hotspot which moved down the coast, and that gives you a secondary different type of mountain, which is like a basalt-based mountain, and that runs the whole way down that stretch of coast. So you've got that bioclimatic geographical influence, and it's roughly the same for that 500 or 600 kilometer stretch.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating to me. And what I love about the east coast of Australia is that you can go over the range and then you're in land, you're in a different place, you know. And that was the case in Woolgoolga.
You're in the tablelands.
Yeah, that's right. And so when we left Woolgoolga, and so we drove up, and I've mentioned this on the show. We drove up along the road, and so every kilometer more humid. It gets heavier and heavier, the air, and I remember getting to Mackay and thinking, okay, right, now we're actually pretty far north.
Now
because we were in Mackay just for for one night, and in the morning we were set to leave again and head north, but I managed to squeeze a trip to the Mackay Botanical Gardens and caught on pygmy goose.
You didn't squeeze. Did you sneak up to Youngalla for the honeyeater?
No, I saw the sign. I tell you what, I saw the sign driving past, But when my wife was in the car and it was a long trip, and I would have done it, but no, not this time. I'll be back. Always leave something to be desired.
Yeah.
But Mackay is cool, man. Like the botanical gardens, I got cotton pygmy goose for just there, wandering whistling duck, magpie goose, of course. So all of these kind of northern Australian birds starting to really show in Mackay, and I was
you've definitely got that. You've got that I'm a Victorian birder thing going on, and you're just like all these things which if you're not from Victoria, like, yep, they're pretty stock standard birds. You're like, oh my god, something different.
That's right. Yeah. And
right.
So that's exactly it. And so I was like, so exciting. And then, we got to Cairns, past Townsville. We went to the Taito wetlands in Ingham.
Yep.
Where I managed to take white-gaped honeyeater. That was cool. Great bird. I haven't seen it since. I don't think they're that common.
Okay.
No,
I think they start to creep. My North Queensland distribution map is failing me, but they're if you go over to Darwin, they're a suburban honeyeater in Darwin.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
In Broome as well. So they're a kind of that's really for me what their epicenter is. But I think we saw them quite a lot in Cape York as well. So
maybe they're a bit seasonal, but I haven't. I've looked. I've looked for them, but I haven't seen them. And mostly you get the kind of more standard honeyeaters, a lot of yellow honeyeaters, that's fantastic as well in itself. The brown honeyeaters, of course, varied. Duskies, varied as well on the Esplanade. They're beautiful. So that brings us to Cairns, where I am now. And what can I say? I saw I got great-billed heron the other day.
Oh, I think I haven't listened to your last episode, but I listened to the one before where you're talking about great-billed heron at the Esplanade. So glad you went and tasted
I got it. Oh, what a bird! Like that's just great. So here we are. That's it.
Here we are in Cairns. Right, video camera versus stills. Why have you made life hard for yourself? Why?
Oh, I'm into that. Well, yeah. I love video. I think video is the best medium to capture interesting behavior and to capture interesting vocal expression and to capture interaction between different birds. I love filming birds. That's my big passion, because you can take a little moment, and you can argue you're doing this with a photo as well, but a photo is just literally a moment. But a video is a combination of moments that you can bring home and then publish online, and then just have that forever. I filmed that great-billed heron. The video's on my YouTube channel now, and I managed to capture it hunting, and it got a fish. And so it's not just a photo of it plunging its head, it's the whole video and the whole sequence of it plunging its head. Its wings are opening. It's getting the fish is flopping about. Then you just get that in a video. For me personally, I feel that just communicates so much more than a photo. But I can see why the contrary can be argued, because a good photo is also effective in that way. But for me, video is a very big joy of birding, like filming the birds. And I can take a piece. It's like I can take a piece of the bird home with me, in a sense, and keep it forever on my YouTube channel and on my hard drive. And it's
Do you think video is people talk about bird photography as an art form as well. Like it's sort of a so you're never going to take a video and hang that on your wall in the way that you are with a photo, but it captures it undoubtedly is a better way of communicating the behavior of an animal than photography, because photography is if a video outtake is a moment, then a photograph is an instant, and you just get way more out of that section of video than you do with an individual photo, unless the photo is perfect. But that's the
no, but that's right. And I love filming birds. Like I just love it. And so I have access to eBird to be able to upload videos. So they've given me that permission because they've checked the videos and
Yeah.
of relatively high quality. So that's good, and I love doing that and sharing that and just capturing it and just spending the time to just it's almost the word that comes to my mind is to steal that moment.
Yeah.
Because usually it's through the binoculars or on a photo, but having the video, it's like you can actually relive the moment as it was happening in real time and see the actual movements in real time of the bird. So yeah.
And so I think I've got a recently purchased a video camera. I've got a Panasonic HC 1500, which is it's a Handycam 10mm image sensor, 600 mil optical equivalent sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that films in 120 frames per second. And that's something I don't think a lot of people realize this, but when you're watching a wildlife documentary and they're playing it back to you, it's not happening in real time. That's slowed down.
Exactly.
And there's different, and there's different. I filmed a Australian spotted crake a few months ago, and played that back at half speed. Was watching the video to outtake, and you could see how it was foraging in a way that you never would pick up. You could see that as it was moving through, and it's sort of like there's a brine fly moved over and picked up the fly.
Wow.
And you could see that detail by playing it back slowly with the camera, and you could, and even sort of like being there in the moment with high quality spotting scope, you weren't picking that up.
Fabulous. Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely there's stuff to be learnt from video, and there's stuff to be learnt. A lot of people do sound recording as well. That's sort of like an untouched. It's sort of, I suppose every single bird in Australia now, bar buff-breasted button quail, has been photographed, and it's been photographed a bajillion times, and I wouldn't say it's been done to death, but you're not really, the chances of you actually bringing something in that's completely new from the photographic medium in bird watching in Australia is quite rare now. Whereas it's quite plausible that you could go out tomorrow to your local park with a sound recorder and record a call which we don't have a decent record of ever, or go and go with your video camera and record a behavior which hasn't been recorded before. So there's stuff to be, it's sort of still this emerging thing which has just become more and more popular now.
Yeah. Lilu, how's she going? But yeah, absolutely, and that's part of why I love video. Like it's emergent, you know. I like to be a pioneer, you know, and a scientist in a way, in that sense, and provide footage for scientists to be able to see. Oh, it's look how it's hunting, it's doing that. So yeah, video is part of the joy birding for me. Absolutely.
Right. So tell me about the equipment that you're using right now. What your ideal setup would be if sort of money was no problem, and what would you recommend for somebody who's getting into video for the first time?
Good question. So I currently have a Sony DSC HX400V. It's right here. Let me grab it. And it's surprisingly small.
Yeah.
This is it. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. If you're listening, go to the YouTube and you can see the camera. So it's basically just quite a compact one with a 50 times optical zoom. And so I always use a tripod when I can, because there's nothing worse than, because the farther in you zoom, the more vibration you'll get because of the handheld, instability. So a tripod for me is essential, because you get that absolute stability, and the only thing that's moving is the bird or its environment, not you. You're not moving.
Yeah.
So I've got that. The tripod is a very simple tripod, Joby Everpod Flow, which does the job. It sometimes takes a while to lock in on the actual bird and get it really stable. For binoculars, I've just got the 10x50 Aculon by Nikon, which do the job great. So my setup is actually very humble. It's not thousands of dollars worth, which I think is okay. I don't mind that.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing as well, is I think and that might be an attraction to video, is that because there's so many people who are doing still photography, if you want to get your images sort of like seen and recognized and even just like appreciated by people, you don't need to make money out of it to make it worthwhile. But if you wanted to actually have other people see it and enjoy it, then you're in many ways competing with thousands and thousands of other people who are doing a similar thing, and they might have a $20,000 or $30,000 camera set up, and it's like there is always a skill component, but good glass makes a huge difference. For
no, for sure, so. For sure. Yeah, you've got so much variety as well in that, and if I had unlimited finances, I don't know, I'd probably, there's those really big cameras, that I'd love to kind of learn how to use with this huge zoom, and you can hear them. That's how advanced they are. When they're recording. Yeah, maybe in the future, but for now, like this does the job. Because finances is always something to consider in birding. And some people are more wealthy than others, and that's normal. But you just got to do with what you have and be happy, and I'm happy with this. So for the moment, and
I suppose it becomes a trade-off as well, because as you said, you can go bird watching with if $150, $200 gets you a pair of usable binoculars, right? And then it just becomes a case of, do I get better optics, or do I get a camera, or do I just stick with my pair of binoculars and I just invest that money in going bird watching?
Yeah.
So, so there's different horses, different courses. Obviously, if you've got thousands of dollars lying around, then you can do everything. So, but most people they have to at some point. We've got to make a trade-off between one of those two things. What would you recommend for new video photographers in terms of kit?
That's I think this is a good start, actually. If you're planning on just starting it, it's relatively affordable. You can get them easily online. The zoom is really good. Make sure to get a tripod. That's my advice. I've never been one to really know how to give advice. I just kind of do what works for me. See what I mean? If Sony DSC HX400V, that's what I use for my bird videos. If you want to go on my YouTube channel and have a look at what the results are, go ahead, and see if that speaks to you, and you can get that one if you want. That was bad advice, but whatever.
So something with a big optical zoom, right? What about the frame rate? Is that something that does it have like a higher frame rate option, or is it just sticks to your regular 30?
No, it can go up to 60, or more precisely 59.94. So that's enough for birds. You don't want more than that, unless you want to go slow motion. As you mentioned before with the Australian spotted crake. But for real time footage, 60 is the higher end that you want to go, because if you go higher than that, it starts to look unnatural, doesn't it? Because
it's like freezes and grabs a little bit too much. So you want to record at those higher frame rates if you have the intention to maybe slow it back down later, right?
That's right. That's it.
So, and there's heaps so these are, and that's not a committed video camera. That's something that you can use for stills and all that sort of stuff too, right?
Yep. So I use that for stills as well sometimes. It's very basic. It's really quite humble. Like it's not top of the range anything, but for me it does a job, and it has done for how long now? Couple of years. So it's been fine. I haven't felt the need to replace it. If something works for me, I'm just going to keep using it. If it keeps giving results that I'm happy with, especially with video, then that's fine. And for my birding today full episodes that I do on my channel about birding, where I'm out birding, my wife does have a Nikon, kind of a more advanced Nikon that she uses to film me, but it doesn't have the zoom. The good thing with the Sony is the zoom, and for birds that's really important because you do want to capture that detail. But so it's, everyone has their own preference, but for me that's what's been working really well.
Well, we'll see how the Cairns tropical weather deals with it, because
Oh, yeah,
it can do that humidity can do an absolute number on optics.
for sure. Yeah, especially in the wet season. We're just going into the dry now as we record. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can remember being up in Cairns in January and um, sort of was inside, and then in the morning stepped outside and right after rains and just completely fogged up
yeah,
all of my camera gear, and it
yeah,
was completely unusable.
wow,
Yeah.
yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
took several hours to actually sort of like come back to equilibrium. But yeah, anyway, so you've mentioned that you're now working for a hotel chain or sort of like a ecotourism chain at the moment.
yep. That's right.
How does that interact with your bird watching as a hobby? Like how do you work that in with your schedule, so to speak?
Yeah, it is difficult because it's full time and it's office hours. Um, so usually on my days off, I go. I don't usually bird during the week because because it's full time and I just want to get home, and I've got, like to spend time with my wife in the evenings, of course,
Yeah.
and you've got these different things going on, and doing that also makes me look forward to birding. Like on those days I do have off and that I can go and like, okay, this is my birding time. I'm going to give everything I've got. I'm going to go out. I'm going to set an alarm. So yeah, that's how it's kind of worked around that job. Also because yeah, it's good to have that kind of downtime as well, where you're not doing anything. I think for me anyway, that works. And especially, I guess maybe because now we're going into winter and the daylight isn't quite as extensive as it would be in the.
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is for Cairns though, but you do
It's
have
much
that.
more
Mm,
it's much more 6 till 6 in Cairns. Like
yeah.
you don't get this nonsense where it's 3:30 in the morning and it's broad bloody daylight and it doesn't get dark until 10.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
basically that's how it's worked. And office jobs do take their toll on you in terms of kind of stress sometimes, and there's lots of things going on and you kind of want to zone out a bit. And birding is good for that. But for me, I need to go birding for a while. I'm not really
Yeah.
the type of birder that goes for 20 minutes down in the park. Usually I like to go for like a good 3-4 hour chunk somewhere cool.
Yeah.
That's
Well, that
so
makes sense. That makes sense since you're doing video, because it's like I
yeah,
can't imagine that being something which is relaxing to do when you've got
yeah.
this little 20-minute time video window to get in. So
Exactly. That's a
uh,
really good point that you picked up on. Yeah, yeah. So I like to take my time with videos and often just sit somewhere and just see what comes up and just walk with my tripod over my shoulder and my camera there. And yeah, but yeah, and I'm sure lots of people, and you would be familiar with this as well. Like work does get in the way sometimes
yeah,
with your birding. Yeah,
yeah, it does, and it's sort of, I think the beauty of being um, sort of like a professional conservation scientist / ornithologist is that you get these chunks of time throughout that. It's seldom consistent. Like I don't think anybody who is an ecologist would know this. It's like you don't get to go and do field work every day of the week or every week of the year. It tends to be here's your field season and here's the chunk of time
yeah,
that you get to do. It's the best thing about the job, is that you get to go to an amazing place and do what essentially is your hobby and paying you to do it.
yeah.
But that's only a very very small chunk of it. So the rest of the time, and so I'm more of a once a month go somewhere really good and
Oh,
and then spend several days there, so to speak.
yeah,
And
yeah,
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 yeah. So I mean, obviously, when you first move to a spot and everything's new, then you're more inclined to like go and do a morning's bird watching somewhere in your local. But once you've sort of like really settled into an area, it's like, okay, that's sort of
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
sort of been that's something that I've done, and I don't feel like I need to keep going back to Postman like every weekend, for example. So that's
yeah.
sort of like the um but yeah, I'd much rather sort of like almost like save my time up and then go and spend it in this one really awesome spot. And
Absolutely, yeah, no, for sure. And also, just on that, looping back to the video quickly, for me, I have to spend a lot of time actually on the computer editing them and cutting them just to the right
Mm,
angle because
yeah,
most of the video is not non-usable. So it's
yeah,
only when I get a really good shot of a bird or a very stable shot of a bird that I'm going to use those 20 seconds of it out of
yeah.
2 minutes, maybe. So I've got to do a lot of cutting and editing, and then uploading as well. And yeah, so it's a whole process as well to get those
That's
videos up there. Yeah.
I used to do quite a lot of photography, and my PhD killed it. It was basically, and I did a trip to Alice Springs, and I took 10,000 photos on the trip, and I never edited any of them, and that was 2014, and I have not I've not edited and posted photos since. I've probably taken another 100,000 photos, but I've never.
Yeah.
It's sort of you just don't. You probably spend more time editing than you do actually photographing stuff.
Yeah. No,
So
and for video, that's completely the case for me. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Um. Okay. All right. Moving on. How does that is? Yeah. So it's the weekends. It's in the off time. So
Yeah.
do you
Off
have any?
times.
You've got some big trips planned. You've got some spots in. Are you going to try and get up to Cape York? Are you have you got up to Atherton and Daintree at all yet?
Yes, I have. Yeah. So just going back to my work, one of the lodges that we take reservations for is Daintree Eco Lodge, which is right there up on the river near Daintree Village. So I went up there to check out the hotel just for work, and made the most of kind of the time to see some birds and stuff. Atherton Tablelands as well, beautiful place. Crater Lakes, Lake Eacham,
Yeah.
beautiful spots. In terms of bigger trips I have planned at the moment, no big trips. My dad is coming up. When is he coming up? Is it the? Oh, man, my memory's so bad. I'm just realizing. Um, it's yeah, end of June, and so in a month's time he'll be up here. So we're hopefully getting maybe 3 days off in a row and
Yeah.
go over the tablelands into the drier habitats,
Yeah.
maybe to
Okay.
see stuff like squatter pigeon and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But yeah, I'd love to go up to the Iron Range as well.
That's
Yeah,
a great. I think I did about a month up in Cape York, and that was for some rock
wow.
wallaby stuff. And we did about a week and a bit in Iron Range, and then we spent the rest of the time down, down, and I've completely Artemis Station, where the golden short parrots are. So we were staying there because there's an endemic rock wallaby that is that Artemis Station is the most southern locality for it. So I went and
Ah.
did a little bit of a sort of like self-prescribed expedition where I went and got some photos of it, which is those will be actually I have edited some photos and I've got those guys on video and some stills of that guy. So that will be in the next Australian mammal book. That's going to be in that. So
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because the current, if you look, if anybody has got any field guides at the moment, if you rip out and look up Cape York rock wallaby, it'll probably have a skin of the Cape York rock wallaby, and that's the reference photo of it.
Wow.
So they're very sneaky little critters. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we spent a bunch of time there, and then we went into Iron Range, and we did it in November. Which, if anybody's thinking about going to Cape York in November, I would suggest not doing that because it's the worst time of year because you've had the full extent of the dry season, and now it's hot and it hasn't started to rain yet. So it's now the humidity's through the roof. It's high 40s, but it hasn't rained yet. So all of the reptiles and frogs and stuff aren't out yet. And you're getting all of the heat and humidity and then none of the benefits associated with it. So November's the worst. Don't go. So you kind of want to do Cape York twice, I think. You want to probably do it in winter and then you want to do it in the full wet. And that's I think a lot of people probably fly into Iron Range in January, February once the wet's kicked in. Because from what I understand, you can see almost everything species-wise in a day or two in Iron Range if you go in the middle of the wet season, and you maybe won't see them because they're migrants, right? So a lot of them,
Yeah.
a lot of the birds aren't going to be there at all. And then if you go there early in the season, then they're not quite doing their thing yet. So,
Yeah, for sure. Can't wait to get up there. Can't wait. one day.
Yep. Yep. So everybody would know by now that you're an absolute obsessed eBird nut, and that's your sort of one of your big things with your bird watching is your list keeping and getting that media into those eBird lists.
Yes.
So you've traveled. What sort of numbers are you on? What's the Georg Jurek life list looking like?
Well, that's very difficult to answer because I'll tell you, I'm not a fan of historic lists. So I haven't gone back to, Scotland, Switzerland, most Singapore birds or Borneo birds. I haven't gone back and added them as historic lists. For some reason, I don't like it. I only want to, it's like I started using eBird. It would have been 2017, 2018. In Chile. And so I don't know why. I don't know why I don't like the historic lists. I think it's kind of like I wasn't using eBird yet, so I don't know. For me personally, I just now yes, I use eBird all the time, but for historic sightings, I like to kind of keep them as that, and not as eBird lists. So I've got good numbers for Chile and for Australia. If you join the Patreon page, everyone, you can find out what they are. I'm not going to tell them here.
Oh, sneaky. There we go. All right, everyone, support Guillaume and he'll keep making podcasts for us. Yeah. Seems important. Well, so I mean, I'm sort of the same. I don't really use eBird for my life list keeping. I've got a spreadsheet which I keep so for me, my Australia list is sort of like the number one thing that I sort of like care about in terms of sort of numbers. As much as I care about numbers, it's my Australian list. And there's places there's probably 200 or 300 birds that I've seen which are just sort of lost into the ether, which I've probably forgotten the names of them. I haven't written them down anywhere. And retrospectively collating them. So it's just, and international bird watchers are probably just shaking their head at right now. But yeah, I really don't. I go birding in a different country, and I go. That's really like in the moment bird watching for me, and it's sort of I'll leave and go on and do something else, and those sort of numbers don't really matter subsequently.
Yeah. No, for sure. I'm the same with driving. When you're driving and you see a bird like a kestrel, if you'd look right now, my Cairns LGA, it wouldn't have kestrel on it. But I've seen the kestrel in Cairns LGA because it's been driving. I just haven't stopped to make a list for it. That's the kind of complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, safety first.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so, is it just birds? What is there anything else natural history wise that you're after? I mean, like you're in Cairns now, so you should probably get into butterflies and dragonflies and all those sorts of cool things as well. Like it's the birding. There's a big bad world out there and it's more than birds. Do any of those things take your fancy?
Well, yes, they do. So in Woolgoolga, I started to get kind of into moths and butterflies and insects, especially after it was season 2, episode 3, I believe, where I interviewed Harry Nystrom. He's from Finland, and he talked all about entomology and how insects interact with the environment and how birds are affected by insects and vice versa. And I don't know, that kind of clicked with me. And I said, and I took the car one day up Woolgoolga Creek Road with a big bed sheet. Yeah. And I took my tripod. So I hung one side of the tripod, one side of the bed sheet on the tripod and the other to a nearby branch or whatever. And I left my headlights on and see what showed up. Beautiful things, showing up just attracted by the light and being on the bed sheet like this. And I've kind of let that go a little bit in recent weeks, but I definitely feel a kind of proclivity towards moths, especially in butterflies and those cryptic sort of insects, sort of thing.
There's actually, can't remember who it is, but there is a long-term university study in Iron Range, which is doing where they go in, I think, once a month and do moth trapping. So
Oh, cool.
that
Yeah.
would be an amazing field trip for anybody who's into moths to go to Iron Range and put a moth trap out. That would be next level.
Yeah, for sure. Like I don't know, something about it's very mysterious. Again, looping back to the very beginning where I said the mysterious side of birds. You know, that applies to other living things as well, and moths especially. Like I don't know, like they just come out at night and they're just so small, you know, and they can be big. They're small, but they can be big. I don't know, lots of different things to explore, and especially up here, like I'm into mammals as well, but mammals never really hooked my interest so much as birds and now moths and butterflies and insects are doing. Maybe I'll come around, but and especially up here, I'm sure that the stuff like ringtail green possum and these crazy stuff, maybe I'll get into that as well as time goes.
I think the mammals are a bit of so there's the other thing that I sort of like keep a list for is I tick all Australian tetrapods. And
cool.
so there's a Facebook page called Australian Tetrapods, and it's a bunch of it's interesting who's on it, because you've got sort of like two core groups. You've got people who are sort of vertebrate field naturalists, and they'll either be sort of academic or environmental consultants. And then there'll be bird watchers who've seen 800 plus Australian birds, and they've run out of things to go looking for. And they're now, oh crap, they're like, oh, what am I going to tick now? And now and it's pretty informal page, but a couple of times a year, it's sort of all right, everyone, what's your totals looking like?
Oh, cool.
And it's sort of, and there's a few chats here, and people will post these trips and that kind of stuff. So it's pretty hilarious when you get the likes of Scott Baker, who, when he first joined, and it's like, here's my 800 and something birds and my 12 frogs, and I'm pretty sure he's probably up to about 1,500 species now, and he's probably way ahead of me. But it's quite interesting, that sort of like different demographics of people that are on that Facebook page.
No, I thought the same. Like how birders kind of, what would you say, they overlap sometimes into mammal reptiles as well as the big one, snakes, into other natural areas. That's always fascinating.
And I think with snakes, so with other vertebrates, I mean, the appeal for birds is that they're easy in a way. It's that they're, compared to if you want to go and get into skinks, you might have to pitfall trap if you want to see different skink species in an area, and you might have as many species of reptile in a given patch of bush as you do birds, but they're way harder to find. So and I think that's why it's like, why do people not mammal spot? Why do people not hurt as much as they do go bird watching? And it's just this accessibility.
The visibility. The
visibility, and so you can do that in your backyard. If I was to do a backyard list for reptiles, I'd have 3 species on it, whereas my backyard list is probably 30 or 40 birds, and I can fit on my back in my backyard and of a night and listen to boobook owls and look across the road and see Australian hobby, but it's still the same species of Hemiogus, which is a type of worm skink, which is in my leaf litter, and that's never gonna.
They don't do much.
It's not going to change. They're not going to do that much. They're not going to change an awful lot between sightings. So it's sort of like, if you're really into reptiles, you've got to go out and you've got to and which means getting onto proper organized field trips.
No, for sure. That's right.
That's the last formal question, and we're into our regular ones now. I reckon butterflies for you. That's the next one.
Okay. Yeah. Butterflies and moths. Yeah.
Butterflies and moths. That's and we'll get some entomologists onto the podcast next, and it'll be the Flying Things Today podcast.
Branch out a bit. Yeah, for sure.
Branch out a bit. Yeah. All right. So closing questions. We'll get into the wrap up zone. So these are the normal questions that everybody, I think, that you ask everyone. So, Hume, what is your favorite bird? Why?
So, I can easily answer this. I never have a favorite bird on a permanent basis. I'm always so struck by a particular bird, usually on a given outing, that it becomes my favorite bird. So for me right now, it's a great-billed heron. I was just
Right. And it was 2 weeks ago. It was little kingfisher.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it just changes for me. It has to. It just has to.
Yeah.
I can't be that dedicated to a single bird when so many different birds are so amazing. Yeah. It just changes for me. Yeah. But great-billed heron.
Great-billed heron. And would you think that and that would never be a bird that you haven't seen yet? It's got to be something that you.
Yeah, I have to have seen it for it to be my favorite bird. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. What bird would you most like to see in Australia, and which one would you most like to see outside of Australia?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think I've asked that in my shows.
I think you've asked variants of like, what's your dream bird? Sort of formalized it into a little bit more structured way of doing it.
Yeah, you've done a better job than me. You could take over the show if you want. An Australian bird that I'd like to see, top of my head. This is similar to my favorite bird. It changes a little bit. I'd love to see a banded honeyeater.
Oh, okay. They're a good. Yeah, I think. They're very good honeyeater. Yeah, I think they're underrated.
Yeah. And I don't. Did they get to Cairns? Do you know? I don't think they get really. To the coast,
I think they're more Gulf of Carpentaria. The last time I saw one of them was in the Kimberley, and they were. We were given a spot for northern shrike tit, and we cross country 5-10 kilometers and summited a scarp and got up to the spot, and there weren't any northern shrike tits there. But we did have like a nice flock of banded honeyeaters moving up and down. It was good, amazing country and like gem clear swimming holes, and it was great.
Yeah, fabulous.
So definitely, I think there are We'll have to. It's no point.
If there are banded honeyeaters in Cairns, they're not common. That's what I'd say. Like
I think they are. I think I've seen them in Townsville for some reason, or in the in Mount like Taravale on the backside of Paluma. So they might be more of a dry country one, and maybe you'll get them in June with your dad.
Yeah. I'll keep you posted. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. We can probably cut that. That however people need to hear about me not knowing where birds are in Australia. Okay, outside of Australia, what's your dream? Yeah. So what's your dream bird that you want to spot outside Australia?
Oh man, what a hard question. I can take however long I want and just cut until I get to the answer.
This is true. This is you're doing all the editing.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think. Like, there's so many. I'm
a big fan of raptors. I think maybe when you interviewed me, you were like, what is it Shorebird? Are shorebirds your favorite group? And I think I gave a diplomatic answer, but raptors are actually my favorite group of birds. So that was a big one for me, getting my last Australian raptor. And so that was if you were to ask me, probably when I was where you are, an Australian raptor would have been one of the big three, I suppose.
What was your last Australian raptor that you got?
Leadwing kite.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah. I mean that's it depends on how you count Australian raptors. So I'm talking about the normal. There's like 24 Australian mainland raptors, which are like normal raptors, and then Oriental honey buzzard are kind of semi-established now in Perth, and they get seen enough that some would probably say that they would count as an Australian raptor. And then there's the Christmas Island goshawk as well, which I wouldn't really count that as an Australian raptor because that's really a little island that's closer to Indonesia as well. So so for me, I think probably raptors were they were my gateway bird, I suppose. I was sort of knew all my raptors before I knew all of the other birds.
I see. Yeah. I think I always seem to come back to ibis bill. You know, that strange bird from the Himalayan
Yeah.
foothills. I'd love to see
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I'll stick with that. There's so many, and
There's so many.
I should have thought about it, but yeah.
Yeah, is there like a one that got away bird? Is there a bird watching trip that you went on and you're like, oh, I really want to see this, and then you missed it? Your biggest dip.
Well, when I was in French Guiana, I was looking for the harpy eagle, but
Yeah.
didn't get it. In Australia, I'm just trying to think through all the trips. There would have been one in Sturt that we didn't get. Ground cuckoo shrike. Haven't seen it yet.
Oh,
Haven't seen ground cuckoo shrike.
And that's a bird that if you were to say to me right now, I'll give you $1,000 if you can take me to go see a ground cuckoo shrike, I don't think I could do it. It's sort of they're really. I mean, there's spots in the Lockyer Valley where you could like consistently like you've got to find it in one day.
Yeah.
And if you find it for me, I'll give you $1,000. And if you don't find it, you've got to give the other person $1,000. I don't think I'd take the bet on.
Yeah.
But they're the sort of thing that you just spend time in the right country long enough and you'll see a ton of them. But on any given day, a tough bird.
Yeah, no, I've come, you know, every time I was out in the adequate habitat, just always at the back of my mind, ground cuckoo shrike, and I've never seen one. There was one reported around Terek, I think a year or two ago.
Yeah,
it was hanging around. I think they're also up near Deniliquin, but no, never had the chance. So that's a target bird for sure. Yeah.
I wonder if they come up as far as Cairns. I've found them so if you go into cracking black soil on the in sort of central Queensland, they're often in those sort of like flat pans there. So that's
okay,
that'd be my hot tip for you. But I don't know whether you might have to drive quite a way to get to that sort of habitat base where you are now.
Probably, yeah. No, but it's definitely a target bird. Yeah, definitely target bird. And I'm trying to think of another target bird. I'd love to. I always think I'd love to go to the Northern Territory just to see the varied lorikeet. Oh, they're so great.
Well, you can get them. You can get them in West Cape York. You don't have to go all the way to and you can do a Mount Isa trip, and they're a town bird in Mount Isa.
Oh, really? Are they really?
Yeah.
I had the idea that they're definitely much more common in not like in the Northern Territory, though, right? Like that's their kind of established.
Yeah. Basically, Mount Isa, and then Mount Isa running the whole way through to Broome. And you can get there. They're not as popular. They're not as populous as the other lorikeet species. They're not really an easy bird. They're not a gimme. You got to work for them.
Got to work for them. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Well, very good. Well, thanks very much for that, Guillaume. And I hope everybody has learned a little bit more about you. And I'm sure there's plenty of questions that everyone will have for you that they'll be firing in after listening to this episode.
Yeah, no, for sure. We could do like a kind of mailbag thing. Like if you have your questions, guys, listeners or viewers, just email them to birdingtoday@gmail.com. And we can work something out with Jeremy again. You were a great host, man. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, no, for sure. You've been a delight, and thanks for the questions, and thanks for pushing for the idea. You know, because we were talking about it, but you know, you got to kind of plan these things. So. It was really cool, and we'll see where it goes for hashtag Ask the Host number 2 when that could come. But we'll definitely keep you posted, guys. Thanks, Jeremy. Happy birding. It's been great.
Cheers. See you again.
All right, mate. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to or watching this episode of the Birding Today podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to stay up to date with the show, you can follow me on all my social media platforms. And if you want to take it a step further and support the show and also get some cool benefits, you can support me on Patreon as well. So again, thank you for listening or watching, and I'll see you in the next one.